Cockney gambler Jake Green is eventually released from prison after serving 7 years in captivity. 2 years after being freed, Johnny and his brother Billy visit one of the region's most significant casinos in an attempt to collect the money they owe the proprietor, criminal mobster Dorothy Machi. He lets Jake participate in his secret game, despite the advice of his bodyguard Paul. Jake's fear prevents him from using the elevator on the way up, but the other bodyguards remind him that they have to ascend 20 levels. Fighting a panic attack, he gives in and uses the elevator. Jake loses his first wager, which was a chip toss versus another table player. He is intentionally creating a false sense of security in Matcha by doing this. He wins this time when he places the same wager with him. With their suitcases full with cash, Billy and Jake rush out of the casino. Zach stops them on their way out and informs them they're in danger and that he can help. Jake chooses to use the stairs this time, but before he can descend a single step, he faints and collapses as the card reads, "Take the elevator." Matcha confides in Paul about his concerns as Jake is taken to the hospital. After serving 7 years in prison, Jake must want more retribution, particularly in light of the incident involving his sister-in-law. To get rid of him, Matcha tells Paul to hire the best hitman in town. Jake is informed in the hospital that there was no apparent cause for the blackout and that he should relax at home while awaiting the results of the blood test. Jake takes the bodyguards for security, but they are all shot as soon as they get there. He only dodges because he spots a card on the ground that reads, "Pick this up." He attempts to flee in his vehicle, but the driver is also shot. Fortunately for him, Zach shows up right in time to rescue him and remove him. Since he never misses, the hitman sorter is baffled as to how he missed and surmises that someone must have tipped Jake off. He informs Matcha, nonetheless, that he missed because he felt uneasy. Zach brings Jake to see Avi, his partner, who has managed to obtain Jake's medical records. Jake has a rare blood disorder that will kill him in 3 days, according to the test findings. The men offer Jake their security on 2 unchangeable terms. He must give them all of his money and comply with all of their requests, including responding to their inquiries. They offer him 3 hours to make up his mind, but Jake is so certain they're playing a prank on him that he walks out without a word. Jake receives the same results of the hospital, but he believes Zach and Avi must have paid the lab. As a result, he seeks a second opinion from his private physician, who likewise provides the same diagnosis. After threatening him with his rifle to ensure that he isn't also getting paid, Jake acknowledges that he has no other option and returns to accept the men's arrangement after obtaining money from the bank. Avi reveals that they are loan sharks and that they will be lending Jake's money when they head out for a ride. Avi asks that Jake tell him everything about his past with Matcha when they visit their first client to deliver the money. The 3 Eddies were 3 extremely dim-witted men that once worked for Matcha. Before a huge game, they lost their card man, so they contacted Jake to take his place because they knew he was a good player. In order to protect Billy's family, Jake had to agree even though he wanted to say no. But as the game went on, the other men at the table started making fun of Jake and his mom. Jake began a gunfight because he wouldn't accept that. The next thing Jake knew, someone had dropped his name, and the police were questioning him when the power went out and the money vanished. They killed his sister-in-law inadvertently when she attempted to defend her daughter and intimidated his niece to prevent him from speaking. Jake kept the fact that Matcha was sentenced to 7 years in prison for organizing the games from the police. Matcha used the Eddies as concrete because he was perhaps offended by them during that period. Zach sends Jake to a motel after seeing a number of clients. Sam Gold, the ultimate figure that other criminal lords aspire to be like, is visited by Matcha and Paul in the interim. But since Gold never gets guests, they meet with Lily Walker, his advisor, who consents to help Matcha negotiate a powder deal. Gold doesn't enjoy notoriety or second chances. She also reminds him. Later, while playing chess with Zach, Jake pays them additional money before being questioned about his incarceration. Jake decided on solitary after being presented with a choice between 7 years of solitary and 14 years of regular time. He shared a cell with 2 longtime inmates, a chess master and a con artist. They understood everything about one another, even if they never spoke. The 3 of them would exchange notes inscribed in the library books for the first 5 years of Jake's sentence. Jake discovered their secret to winning any game in the globe in this way. The 2 men agreed to bring Jake along when they planned a prison break, but when they eventually went, they vanished silently, leaving Jake behind. He discovered that those 2 men had stolen all of his money when he was freed 2 years later, leaving just a message that read, "You can only get smarter by playing a smarter opponent. At several casinos, Jake began to use the method to become wealthy. Jake keeps working by going to different clients and giving away his own money as the days go by. He can't bring himself to harm helpless, desperate individuals, even if he's meant to threaten them if they don't pay. Abby and Zach, in the meantime, pilfer the safe that has the powder Matcha promised Lily. Matcha sends Paul to do whatever it takes to settle this after learning that he has been robbed. Paul approaches Lord John, the Triad Kingpin, and their adversary, who consents to supply the powder, but only at an exorbitant cost. Billy calls Jake later to alert him about Zach and Abby. Jake disregards the warning and keeps working until he is supposed to shoot a terrified customer. Instead, he tries to shoot Abby, but just as Abby knocks him out, he finds the pistol is empty. Hours later, Jake awakens in the motel and receives a call from Abby informing him that he has survived his third day and that he ought to get a checkup. And the doctor verifies that the diagnosis was incorrect and that Jake is doing well. When he presses Abby for answers, Abby simply responds that he will have to wait. Paul has been gathering information in the meantime, and Jake's name has surfaced as being connected to every issue his troops have been facing. Matcha thus gives him the command to murder him. Abby and Zach are waiting for Jake when he gets back to the motel, alerting him to the presence of Matcha's goons inside the room. The men chase after Jake as he flees, but he escapes them, particularly after one of the goons accidentally shoots himself after slipping. When the other crooks discover the body, they believe Jake was responsible. When Jake visits Abby and Zach at their workplace, they admit that they have always known Jake withheld information regarding his previous agreement with the Eddies. Those three clowns had been waiting for him to be released from prison in order to murder him. He made a deal with the Eddies to save his life. He would give them 3% of any money they lent him each month. Only one Eddie consented the first time. They all wanted to be in, though, this time for 4%, as they saw he had fulfilled his word. Actually, Jake wasn't losing anything since he was using another Eddie's money to pay each Eddie. They eventually ran out of money to lend, so they took out a loan from Matcha, who soon developed an interest in the Eddie's enigmatic source of income. Jake decided to take a trip with his brother and niece after using the formula to gamble and get wealthy. Matcha killed the Eddies at that point since they had not reimbursed him. Speaking of Matcha, his goons stop over to inform him that Jake got away when he is eating dinner at a classy restaurant, after realizing that John's lover is posing as a server. He just wounds her, though, and his shot is still off. In the midst of the chaos, the woman is able to shoot Matcha's finger off before she dies. Sorter is then dispatched to assassinate Lord John and his soldiers at their hiding place. Let's move back to Jake, who is still playing golf on a roof with Zach and Abby. They tell him that since gold doesn't exist, no one ever gets to see him. He is nothing more than the embodiment of avarice and vanity. Only those who invest in him are under his control. Jake must so alter the guidelines that govern what he permits to govern him. Jake then stealthily enters Matcha's bedroom. Before departing, Jake accepts Matcha as the superior criminal lord, apologizes to him for defrauding him of his money, and informs him that he has made a donation in his honor while battling the voices in his head that stand in for his ego. Jake uses the elevator, which becomes stuck on the 13th floor, to face his fears. He has a mental dialogue while battling a panic attack in which he finally leaves the game as a free man and rejects his ego. Driven insane by his own vanity, Jake sees Matcha waiting for him with a gun on the ground floor as the elevator starts up again. But Jake is content with himself and just passes him. Matcha is enraged by this since he finds it incomprehensible that someone would not be afraid of him. When the men discover him, they start assaulting him and questioning him, not believing him when he claims he has no idea where Jake and the powder are. Sorter becomes uneasy as Paul's tactics of torture rapidly intensify, particularly when they force the girl to come out of the cupboard after they hear her sob. Sorter overcomes his ego and starts executing his fellow henchmen in a methodical and efficient manner, refusing to harm a child. But in the end, he makes a mistake and also dies. Meanwhile, Lily pays Matcha a visit. Gold, who dislikes attention and is upset to see Matcha's name plastered on the tabloids, offers him a wreath. He goes into yet another frantic rage as Lily tells him that Matcha's time is up and he won't have another chance. Jake and the powder are taken to Matcha's casino by Abby and Zach, where Abby eventually defeats Jake at chess while disclosing the complete circumstances of the incident. The men in the cells next to Jake's had been him and Zach, and they had always wanted to take him away with them. However, he hadn't been prepared to accept the fact that they had only ever existed in Jake's imagination. Sadly, he doesn't have time to process this since the bodyguards from the casino arrive to take him to see Matcha, who is accompanied by the girl. When the powder sacks fall to the ground, Jake assures his niece that everything will be all right. Even though Matcha is aiming his rifle at the girl, he still shows no signs of fear, which enrages Matcha. Matcha puts the gun to his head and fires because he feels embarrassed, and his inner ego voices conclude that Jake is incapable of harming a deceased man.